Today, I want to dive deep into what I believe is one of the most fascinating quarterback situations in the NFL right now, and that's what's happening in Cleveland with the Browns. Now, I've been following this story closely, and I have to tell you, the more I analyze the situation, the more convinced I become that the Browns are making a massive mistake if they don't make Shedeur Sanders their starting quarterback right now. Let me start by saying this, and I know some of you are going to disagree with me in the comments, but hear me out. Joe Flacco should absolutely be the backup quarterback, and Dillon Gabriel, he shouldn't even be on the active roster for game days. I know that sounds harsh, but I'm going to break down exactly why I feel this way, and I think by the end of this analysis, you're going to see where I'm coming from. First, let's talk about what we've seen from Shedeur Sanders in the preseason. Now, I was at the Panthers game, and let me tell you something, what I witnessed was special. This kid completed 14 of 23 passes for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns in his NFL debut. But here's what the stats don't tell you, it's how he carried himself out there. The pocket presence, the decision-making under pressure, the way he commanded the huddle. It was like watching a 10-year veteran, not a rookie making his first appearance. I've been covering quarterbacks for years on this channel, and I can usually spot the rookies who are going to struggle with the transition from college to the pros. Sanders doesn't have any of those red flags that I typically look for. His release is quick, his footwork is fundamentally sound, and most importantly, he doesn't panic when the pocket collapses. These are traits that you can't teach folks. Either you have it or you don't, and Sanders clearly has it. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Joe Flacco had a decent run with the Browns when he came in during the 2023 season, I'll give him that. But we need to be realistic here. The man is 40 years old, and while his experience is valuable, his physical limitations are becoming more apparent every game. I watched him in practice last week, and while he can still make the throws, he lacks the mobility and athleticism that today's NFL demands from the quarterback position. Here's where I think the Browns are getting this wrong. They're so focused on Flacco's veteran leadership and playoff experience that they're overlooking what Sanders brings to the table. This Browns offense, with Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford, Amari Cooper, and Jerry Jeudy, is perfectly suited for a quarterback who can extend plays and create opportunities outside the pocket. Flacco is a classic pocket passer, and while that has its place, it's limiting this offense's potential. I want you to think about this for a second. The AFC North is loaded with dynamic quarterbacks. You've got Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, and Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh. If the Browns want to compete in this division, they can't do it with a static, aging quarterback who's past his prime. They need someone who can match the athleticism and unpredictability that these other quarterbacks bring to the table, and that someone is Shedeur Sanders. Let me talk about Sanders' college resume for a minute because I think people are sleeping on what he accomplished at Colorado. This kid threw for over 11,000 yards and 93 touchdowns, with only 20 interceptions during his college career. That touchdown-to-interception ratio tells me everything I need to know about his decision-making ability. He doesn't turn the ball over, which is crucial for a young quarterback trying to establish himself in the NFL. But what really impresses me about Sanders is his mental approach to the game. I've watched his film extensively, and this kid processes information quickly. He goes through his progressions methodically, and when the primary and secondary options aren't there, he either finds the check down or uses his legs to extend the play. This is exactly the type of quarterback Kevin Stefanski needs to maximize his offensive system. Speaking of Stefanski, let's talk about how Sanders fits into his scheme. Stefanski has always been creative with his play calling, but he's been limited by the quarterbacks he's had to work with. With Sanders' mobility, Stefanski can now incorporate read option plays, RPOs, and designed quarterback runs into his playbook. This opens up an entirely new dimension for the Browns' offense that simply doesn't exist with Joe Flacco under center. I know some of you are thinking, but what about Flacco's leadership? Look, I'm not discounting that entirely. Flacco's been in big games, he's won a Super Bowl, and there's value in having that experience in the locker room. But here's the thing, that experience is actually more valuable coming from the backup position. Sanders can learn from Flacco's experience while still getting the reps and game experience he needs to develop. Having Flacco as a mentor and security blanket is the perfect setup for a young quarterback. Now let's talk about Dillon Gabriel, because I know some people think he should be getting more consideration. Gabriel had some decent moments in the preseason, particularly against the Rams, but when I compare his ceiling to Sanders, it's not even close. Gabriel was a third-round pick for a reason. He's got limitations in arm strength and accuracy that are going to prevent him from being a long-term starter in this league. The Browns would be better served keeping him on the practice squad to develop rather than wasting a roster spot on him for game days. Here's what I think is really happening behind the scenes in Cleveland. The coaching staff and front office are being overly cautious because they don't want to rush Sanders and potentially damage his confidence if he struggles early. I get that mentality, but I think it's misguided in this case. Sanders has shown in college and in the limited preseason action that he can handle pressure and adversity. The kid played at Colorado under intense scrutiny, being Deion Sanders' son. If he can handle that spotlight, he can handle starting for the Browns. From a financial perspective, this move makes perfect sense, too. Sanders is on his rookie contract, which gives the Browns significant salary cap flexibility to build around him. They can invest in offensive line help, add weapons in the passing game, or shore up the defense while still having their franchise quarterback locked up for the next 4 years at a reasonable price. Compare that to the cost of trying to find a veteran quarterback solution, and it's a no-brainer. I also want to address the development aspect of this decision. Some people argue that Sanders would benefit from sitting for a year and learning. While there's merit to that approach in some cases, I don't think it applies here. Sanders is mentally ready to handle the complexity of NFL defenses, and the best way for him to continue developing is to get real game experience against live competition. Practice squad reps in preseason games can only take you so far. Look at the success stories of recent rookie quarterbacks who were thrown into starting roles early. Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, and Mac Jones all started as rookies and found success because they were mentally prepared and had the support systems in place. Sanders has that same combination of mental readiness and organizational support that made those quarterbacks successful. The Browns' receiving core is perfectly suited for Sanders' skill set, too. Amari Cooper's route-running precision pairs beautifully with Sanders' accuracy and timing. Jerry Jeudy's ability to create separation gives Sanders reliable targets on intermediate routes. David Njoku at tight end provides a security blanket over the middle, and the running back core gives Sanders check-down options when plays break down. I've been watching tape of Sanders' footwork in the pocket, and it's already more advanced than a lot of veteran quarterbacks in the league. He doesn't waste unnecessary steps, he keeps his eyes downfield when pressure comes, and he has an innate sense of when to step up in the pocket versus when to scramble. These are instinctive, traits that can't be taught, and they're going to serve him well in the NFL. The timing couldn't be better for Sanders to take over either. The Browns have championship aspirations this season, and they need a quarterback who can grow with the team and potentially lead them deep into the playoffs. Flacco might be able to manage games and not lose you contests, but he's not going to be the guy who wins you games when you need a special performance. Sanders has that special factor that could elevate the entire team. I want to talk about Sanders' leadership qualities because I think this is getting overlooked in the quarterback debate. When I watch him interact with his teammates, there's a natural confidence and charisma that draws people to him. He's not cocky or arrogant, but he carries himself like someone who expects to succeed. That attitude is contagious, and it's exactly what a young team like the Browns needs from their quarterback. The division rivalry aspect is huge too. Think about how opposing defensive coordinators are going to game plan against Sanders versus Flacco. With Flacco, they know exactly what they're getting. He's going to stay in the pocket, go through his progressions methodically, and rarely create plays outside the structure of the offense. That makes defensive game planning relatively straightforward. With Sanders, defensive coordinators have to account for his mobility, his ability to extend plays, and his willingness to take shots downfield. They have to assign a spy, they have to be disciplined in their pass rush lanes, and they have to cover for longer because Sanders can extend plays with his legs. This creates additional stress on the defense and opens up opportunities for the Browns' offensive playmakers. I've been following the advanced analytics on Sanders' college performance, and they're incredibly encouraging. His EPA per dropback, his pressure rate statistics, and his deep ball accuracy all project favorably to NFL success. When you combine those numbers with what we've seen in the limited NFL preseason action, it paints a picture of a quarterback who's ready to contribute immediately. The injury factor is something people bring up with mobile quarterbacks, but I think those concerns are overblown with Sanders. He's not a reckless runner who's going to take unnecessary hits. He's smart about when to slide, when to get out of bounds, and when to protect himself. His father taught him well about longevity in professional sports, and it shows in how Sanders approaches contact situations. From a marketing and fan engagement standpoint, Sanders brings something special to Cleveland, too. The storyline of Deion Sanders' son leading the Browns would generate national attention and interest that the franchise hasn't had in years. That translates to merchandise sales, television ratings, and overall brand value for the organization. But let's get back to the football reasons, because that's ultimately what matters most. The Browns have a championship window right now with their current roster construction, and they need to maximize every advantage they have. Keeping Sanders on the bench in favor of an aging veteran doesn't align with their championship timeline. They need to develop Sanders now so he can hit his peak during the team's competitive window. I think the coaching staff sees Sanders' potential, but they're being influenced by organizational pressure to win immediately. That's short-sighted thinking. By starting Sanders now, they can have their cake and eat it too. They can compete for a playoff spot this season while simultaneously developing their franchise quarterback for the future. The practice squad assignment for Gabriel makes perfect sense when you think about it from a roster construction standpoint. The Browns need those 53 roster spots for players who can contribute on game days. Gabriel isn't ready to be a backup quarterback, and he's not going to supplant Sanders as the starter, so why waste a roster spot on him? Keep him on the practice squad where he can continue developing without taking up valuable space on the active roster. I want to circle back to Flacco's role as the backup because I think this is actually the perfect situation for all parties involved. Flacco gets to stay in the NFL and continue his career without the pressure of being the starter. Sanders gets the benefit of Flacco's experience and mentorship while still getting the opportunity to develop as the starter. The Browns get the best of both worlds with a mentor-protege relationship that benefits everyone. The bottom line is this. The Browns have a special talent in Shedeur Sanders, and they need to unleash him sooner rather than later. Every game they keep him on the bench is a missed opportunity to accelerate his development and potentially win football games. Joe Flacco has been a solid professional throughout his career, but his time as a starter has passed. The future belongs to Sanders, and that future should start now. I know this has been a long analysis, but I felt it was important to cover all the angles of this quarterback situation. I'm curious to hear what you all think in the comments. Do you agree that Sanders should be the starter, or do you think the Browns should stick with Flacco for now? Let me know your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our NFL analysis content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.